Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Granada Forum. On November 11th, 2010, tonight we have an incredible guest, Ted Gunderson, a former bureau chief for the FBI in the early 80s. So without any further ado, let's give this gentleman a warm round of applause.
Thanks a lot. I feel like old home week. I've been here so many times. Can I raise this?
You don't get older.
Huh?
You don't get older.
I just had my 82nd birthday 2 days ago. Yeah. All right. Let me raise this up a little bit here. I never was mechanically inclined. You got it? Let me get it up. That's good, right there. That's good, right there.
Hopefully it'll stay.
Beg your pardon?
You have a choir later, or these steps here?
I couldn't understand what he said. What'd you say, sir?
I'm expecting a choir.
Oh, choir? Oh, well, they're coming later. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for the invitation, Wendy. You're a special lady. She deserves a round of applause for what she's done. Boy. Well, you know, I heard a very inspiring speech at Chuck's 9/11 Truth Conference here, and I said, I've got to go see Wendy and get some information that I've developed that I've never presented before and get it out to the public. And that was a great conference, Chuck.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Before I begin, let me just mention that I'm going to do a series of 4 or 5 lectures. If I can't do it here, I'll do it with Dennis in the back room of his camp. I call it Iron City, because he's got a bunch of old cars out there. And but this is the first. And the reason I'm so inspired by your speakers that you had there, Chuck, is because there's a lot of information that needs to be given to the public. And I'm going to do the best I can. Now, there's those people who think there is no conspiracy. So there is a conspiracy, and my lectures are going to be entitled Conspiracy Reality. Okay, and I'm going to prove to you tonight that there is a conspiracy, and hope you will pick this DVD up and pass it out to your friends. I had a young college fellow here from up north. Where are you? Was it Jason? Was that your name? Josh. Yeah, Josh. Yeah, and he said he's having trouble convincing his fellow students about what's going on. So when this is all over, you be sure to get a copy of this, make copies, and pass that out on campus, okay? I have to go back to 1951. I graduated from the University of Nebraska in 1950. By the way, one of my colleagues there was Johnny Carson, and I knew Johnny Carson, yeah. And it was right after World War II. My brother had entered the Air Force, and he over Germany, his bomber went down. He was killed, and he had graduated from the University of Iowa, by the way. So I'm Midwest born and bred, basically. But when I first got out of college, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, which I think happens very regularly. So I took a job with Hormel Meatpacking Company at selling hams. And my kids have always accused me of being a ham all along, so it worked out real well. They used to call me the FBI ham. And I'm driving down Grand River in Detroit, Michigan, and I heard about a friend of mine, Dick Kinsey, who had applied for the FBI and was accepted. And he was my college friend at the university. And I said, if Kinsey can make it, I can make it. And I just kept on driving downtown and applied for the job with the FBI. The only trouble was you had to be 25, and I was 22. So the fellow interviewed me, I'll never forget, his name is Zimmerman. He said, although you're only 22, why don't you write a letter to J. Edgar Hoover and tell him you look older? So I wrote a letter to J. Edgar Hoover, personal letter. I said, Dear Mr. Hoover, although I'm only 22, I look like I'm 28. Actually, I look like I was 19, okay? As you can tell, I am young looking for my age. I always have been. But you know what? 6 weeks later, I was in Quantico, Virginia, shooting gun, going to class, learning about collection and preservation of evidence, federal rules of procedure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'd take a test first. I had to pass a physical. And that was the beginning of an absolutely fabulous career. The FBI in my day, back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, up to about 1980, was a great organization. I'm sorry to say that they have deteriorated considerably, and I'll go into that with details in a few minutes. But in my career, after I left training school, I went to Mobile, Alabama, and I'd never been south of the Mason-Dixon line, and I'm thinking, I'm going to the end of the world. But it was a great experience. And then from Mobile, Alabama, I was transferred to a small town, Union Springs, Alabama, a town of 2,500, just 50 miles west of Phoenix City. If you know anything about Phoenix City, Alabama, it was corrupt, prostitutes in and out, stolen cars. It was right next to Fort Benning, being Columbus, Ohio, or Columbus, Georgia. And so it was a real experience breaking in there. I worked general criminal, Fifth Interstate shipment, interstate transportation, stolen motor vehicle. We had an extortion case and so on and so forth. And from Union Springs, I went up to Knoxville, Tennessee, worked atomic energy cases. From Knoxville, I went up to New York City and worked counter-espionage. We were very active, exposing and identifying espionage agents for the Soviet bloc countries, the Russians and the Chinese, of course. And from there, I went to Albuquerque, New Mexico. I was there for about 5 years. And William C. Sullivan, who was number 2 man in the FBI, actually, there was Hoover and his associate, and then Bill was next, third person, came out to Los Alamos, New Mexico, for a lecture, and I drove him up to Los Alamos. And he took a shine to me and said, Ted, you need to come back to headquarters. I went back to headquarters, worked organized crime and racketeering for 2.5 years when Bobby Kennedy and Jack Kennedy were in office. I had occasion to meet with Bobby Kennedy. And then when Jack was murdered by the New World Order boys, I was taken over to White House Special Inquiry, and I worked White House Matters when Johnson was there. And on one occasion, later on, when I was inspector, I'll come back to the White House and tell you what happened there. It's kind of interesting. And from there, I went up to New Haven, Connecticut. And I'd never been east of the Mississippi, so other than Alabama and Tennessee and so forth, and New York and Washington, D.C., but I'd really, in the New England area, it's a very beautiful state, very nice area, great assignment. And while I was there, the Black Panthers were extremely active. They were taking over college administration buildings. They were running around the country with gun belts on and weapons and so on and so forth. They're a really true revolutionary group. And I was in charge of anti-terrorism. And we did a job on the Black Panthers. And after the Panthers were down out and no longer active, I had a call from William C. Sullivan. And Bill told me I attribute the downfall of the Black Panther Party directly to you, your squad, and the New Haven Police Department. And from New Haven, I went on down to Philadelphia. I was number 2 man in Philadelphia. And in Philadelphia, I was assistant special agent in charge. And probably the most exciting case I'd ever worked in the FBI occurred July 12, 1972, Philadelphia International Airport. 2 terrorists had taken over an airplane, National Airlines Flight 496. And I negotiated with them for 2.5 hours under another airplane with the 3 jets, engines running, and successfully for the release of 119 passengers. And I'm in the process now. I ran across my transcript of my negotiation with the terrorists. By the way, after we successfully rescued the 119 passengers. The plane, I let them take off in another plane, the original plane, and I had the second plane. One plane had run out of fuel and so on and so forth. So we let him go on, and they ran out of gas over Texas, and we negotiated down there for some 9 hours, and they finally gave up. One was sentenced to 60 years, the other one was sentenced to 40 years. But my transcript, I just ran across it recently. My negotiation, that's going to be on my website very soon, I think maybe within a month or so. But from Philadelphia, I went into FBI headquarters as a inspector, and then out later down to Memphis. I was in charge of the FBI Memphis division, and then in charge of the FBI Dallas division, and then the best assignment in the FBI, very frankly, I was in charge of the FBI Los Angeles division. Now, I had over 700 personnel under my command, a budget of $22.5 million, and we covered most of Southern California, 16 offices, and it was a great pleasure to be here. I did mostly public relations work. I had a staff of 24 supervisors, 3 other special agents in charge. I was a senior special agent in charge. And then on March the 30th of 1979, I retired. I had Pat Brown there, former governor. I had Jerry Brown there. I had red buttons. And I had the chief of police, the chief of the sheriff. I had the head of the highway patrol. It was who's who in the Los Angeles area. Now, I mention that because if you go on the internet, you're going to see derogatory information about how I was kicked out of the FBI for practicing satanic ceremonies in the federal building. Okay, and that's just plain disinformation by government operatives. So my first case, after I retired, as a private investigator, was the Dr. Jeffrey R. McDonald case. And those of you who've heard me before, I always start out my lectures with this case. I'm not going to go into detail because later on in one of my lectures I'm going to go into detail. But he was tried and convicted of murdering his wife and 2 children February 17, 1970 in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences. I was contacted by some of his doctor friends, and they asked if I would investigate it. I said, yeah, I'll investigate it, if he did not commit the crime. If he committed the crime, I don't want anything to do with it. I talked to Dr. McDonald, and I was convinced that he was innocent. Within 10 months, I obtained a signed confession from a girl named Helena Stokely, and she said that he did not commit the murders. They were committed by her satanic cult group. And I appeared on a number of national TV shows in this regard, and we went public with the information, and my life's never been the same since. People came from all walks of life, from all parts of the country, and told me about the satanic cult movement in this country. It is big, it is huge, it is dangerous, very dangerous. They sacrifice between 50 and 60,000 people every year. They're involved in kidnapping children and so forth, and it goes on and on and on. But that case is what really woke me up as to what was going on. I've always been a red, white, blue guy, mother, apple pie, Chevrolet, and that sort of thing. And beg your pardon, Dennis? Did you say something? No. Oh, okay. And this case said, in this instance, Dr. McDonald was framed, and the reason he was framed is because the government, mainly the military, were flying drugs in plastic bags in the body cavities of dead GIs out of Southeast Asia into the military bases here in the United States. And Lena told me that her satanic cult group distributed the drugs up and down the East Coast, and the higher-ups in the drug operation did not want this to be known, of course, that they were involved in the murder, and so they basically framed Dr. McDonald. I'm telling you right now, the man is absolutely innocent. He's been in jail for like 30 years, and we have an appeal before the Fourth Circuit at this time. I'm going to go into one of my lectures. I'm going to go into great detail about this case. I can probably talk about it for about probably an hour and a half to 2 hours. But very briefly, what we have in the appeal before the Fourth Circuit is my confessions that I took from Helena Stokely. By the way, she was murdered in January 1983. And also under one of the fingernail of one of the young ladies, the little girl, one of the little girls, 2.5 and 5.5, skin, not skin, but a hair with the root was recovered, and it did not belong to anybody in the McDonald family. Also, Colette, the wife, she had skin under her fingernail, and that skin was scraped from under the fingernails and given to William Ivory, the CID Army investigator, and it disappeared. So there have been a whole series of cover-ups on it. Case is a fascinating case. I really, really hope that we can get him out this time. But anyway, that's basically what happened. That gets me off the ground, so to speak, as to what really was going on. Now, I'm sure all of you are aware of the Illuminati. I'm probably preaching to the choir on this. And I'm sure you're aware that on May the 1st, 1776, Adam Weishaupt, a defrocked priest, announced the 25 goals of the Illuminati. And I'm just going to say very briefly about the Illuminati, because there will be some people who will watch this lecture on DVD and will not know about it. But at that time, the 25 goals: corrupt the youth through sex and drugs, right? Look at what's happening to our society today. Control the press, the mainstream media, elect your own people to office. If you can't elect your own people to office, put your agentures or advisors in, Illuminati advisors, so you can control, to a degree, the person who represents the people, or whatever the situation might be. But I have, this, by the way, this is documented in a book called Pawns in the Game by William Guy Carr. He was a commander in the Navy, retired, the Canadian Navy, who wrote this book. He couldn't understand why we had to have so many wars and so many problems, and so he did his research and wrote this book. Now, here in the, right after Oklahoma City bombing, by the way, one of my lectures down the road will tell you all about the terrorist movement in this country, because it's all, the whole thing is planned. It's an inside job. It's planned to pass the Patriot Act, set up Homeland Security, and so on and so forth. But that'll be separate. But Brian Gumbel, the famous, well-known morning talk show host, and right after Oklahoma City, was interviewing Jim Nichols, Terry Nichols' brother, Terry Nichols, co-defendant of Oklahoma City with McVeigh. And I had given Jim and his family my report. I have a 222-page report. And I gave it to him. And in the interview with Brian Gumbel, he says on national television, "Have you read Ted Gunderson's report?" And Brian Gumbel says, "Oh, he's just a conspiracy theorist," right? Well, that's not right. I'm a conspiracy realist. There is a conspiracy. This lecture is dedicated to all the corrupt politicians, the judges that allow guilty people to go to jail deliberately, and my second webmaster is a victim of this. Not only the politicians there, and the judges, but the bureaucrats who investigate these matters. CIA, FBI, military intelligence. The real, most serious culprits of all are the military intelligence. NSA, they're keeping track of all of our phone calls, of where we are every minute of the day. But when our forefathers established the three branches of the government, executive, legislative, and judicial branch, they had no idea that down the road, years later, there would be a fourth branch. And I call the fourth branch the covert, rogue, government, criminal enterprise. These people, this element of our society, is involved in the drugs, the illegal drugs, kidnapping children, and so on and so forth. And since I got out of the Bureau, I have done everything I can to expose it. I'm exposing it today. Now, one of the programs by the government, and I'm going to go into detail as to how the government operates, how this rogue element operates in the country. I'm sorry, excuse me. And one of the oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
One of the techniques that's used is called COINTELPRO. COINTELPRO is short for Counterintelligence Program. I know all about COINTELPRO. I was one of the individuals in the FBI who actively administered it against the Black Panthers. It's very effective. But here recently, the Southern Poverty Law Center wrote me a letter after I had cancer, by the way. It was discovered last October 28th, about a year ago. And that had an operation April the 6th. I'm glad to report right now I think I'm rid of the cancer. I don't have it anymore. But I had a letter from one of the intelligence officers at Southern Poverty Law Center. Is there anybody that does not know about the Southern Poverty Law Center? Well, the Southern Poverty Law Center, as far as I'm concerned, is a second-person individual organization that's involved with this covert government criminal enterprise. Absolutely no question about it. They listed, and this is, I'm explaining the COINTELPRO program, how it works how they worked it against me. They listed the 40 false patriot anti-government leaders. They also listed the most dangerous patriots in America recently. I'm proud to announce that I made both lists. They also described me as a leading conspiracy monger. Does anybody know what a monger looks like? You're looking at him, I guess. Okay. The Anti-Defamation League, another organization, as far as I'm concerned, that's a spokesperson for this rogue, covert government criminal enterprise. They describe me as an extremist speaker, and they say that I pose as a threat to the country. Do I look like I'm a threat to anybody? No, of course not. Hero. Beg your pardon? A hero. Okay. They claim I will likely become a target of U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder. Now, I don't know what that means, but if I'm going to be on a list or a target of the Department of Justice, so be it. So I will still continue to do what I'm doing. I'd like to emphasize that I'm not an anti-government monger, conspiracy theorist. I pulled the details out of this. I don't want to go into all the details. It's too much. I'm not an anti-government person. I'm an anti-corruptionist. I love my country, and I will continue, as long as I'm alive, to continue to expose this evil element that's permeated throughout our society. I like football, baseball. I like to have a beer once in a while. I'm as normal as any of the rest of you out here, okay? And I'm not anti-government. Again, I'm anti-corruptionist. That's the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Anti-Defamation League, as I said, are fronts for the New World Order. And I remember after Oklahoma City, everyone was clamoring to find out what happened. By the way, I have proved without any doubt that the government was involved in Oklahoma City. No question about it. Absolutely. I'm going to have a whole lecture just on the terrorist movement of these 4 lectures. But I can tell you right now, the car bomb, the truck bomb, was not a fertilizer bomb, okay? They used fertilizer bombs to blow up tree stumps in the backyard of the farmers near the barn, right? They don't blow half a building away. Now, I found out through a scientific magazine and through one of my sources that the bomb was what we call an electro-hydrodynamic gaseous fuel device. For short, I'll call it a barometric bomb. This particular bomb was developed by Hercules Manufacturing in Silicon Valley, California. It was tested in 1982, and I was with a group of individuals in Palm Springs, spook-type individuals, good spook type, not bad spook type, okay? when it was tested. We sat in the hotel room waiting for the results. It was so powerful that one of the technicians was killed and others are injured. President Reagan, I think he was president at that time, put a classification on it and put it on the shelf and said, you know, don't speak about this anymore. That's it. It was highly classified. But one of the persons in the hotel, or in the hotel room, was one of the developers of that bomb. He was a CIA scientist for some 20 years. That's why I knew about it. I obtained the number for this bomb, and the contract number for this bomb, and I sent it to Picatinny Arsenal, wrote a letter to him, and I said, send me a copy of the contract. This is all public information, by the way. And they wrote back and they said, there's no such contract. No such contract. I talked to an inside investigator who represented the McVeigh team. He told me there were at least 11 other people involved. I have copies of the TV shows that afternoon of the Oklahoma City bombing, and every TV station in Oklahoma City announced that they were bringing unexploded bombs out of the building. And one of them made the statement, now we're going to know where these bombs came from. One of them has U.S. Army stenciled on the side of it. That was on the air. I have the copies of that. Wow is right. And there's a lot more to the story than that. But anyway, my report, 222-some pages, is on this CD. Last time I was here, I passed out a CD to everybody that wanted one. And I've got 6,500 pages on that CD. I got 52 reports, Oklahoma City, 911, the car bombing of 93, and so on and so forth. The kidnapping by the Finders, the CIA child kidnapping organization, and it goes on and on and on. I'm making this available. I make this available to the public. And I did. Last time I was here, I passed out 25 or 30 of them. In fact, Dennis makes copies for me. Because I want people to take my work and get it out and educate, educate, educate. So one of the programs that the rogue government uses, in addition to organizations like Southern Poverty Law and Anti-Defamation League, to their advantage, to try to discredit and destroy those of us who are trying to protect and save our country, is called a disinformation program. And if you will look on the internet, you will see where I am one of the heroes of the bad guys, in that I have been accused of, as I said earlier, practicing satanic ceremonies in the federal building. That's why I was kicked out of the FBI. Another topic that's on the internet is that I married Anton LaVey's widow. Anton LaVey was one of the heads of the Church of Satan. And I did know Anton, I didn't know Diana Lively, I think is her name. I didn't know. And I was in Dallas for a period, about 10 years ago. And people call me and write to me from all walks of life. Help me, help me, help me. I help as many as I can. And I had a call from this lady, and she had been up into Idaho to be deprogrammed because she knew that she was a victim of a mind control program called MK Ultra, and that's another story. And she said, I'm driving home, and I'm in Winnemucca, Nevada, and I have my daughter, and I keep wanting to take my hands off the wheel while I'm driving 75 miles an hour. Well, instead of being deprogrammed, I think she was reprogrammed. She was up in Idaho visiting a therapist. So I told her, I said, Diane, again, I'd never met her, just talked to her on the phone. Check into a hotel, I'll get help to you right away. And I called an ex-cop friend of mine in Reno, and I told Don, I said, Don, get over to Winnemucca and rescue this woman. And so he went to Winnemucca and got Diana out and drove her to Reno, and then she took a plane from Reno back home with her daughter. The trouble is, now she had her car in a parking lot in Winnemucca. So Don called, what do I do? I said, well, go get it for her. So Don got on a bus, and he took the bus to Winnemucca, got off the bus. He's walking down the street, it's dark. 3 fellows right behind him. He walks fast, they walk fast. He does more than walk fast, he starts jogging, they jog. He runs, they're running right behind him. He ducks in an alley. One of them came in the alley behind him, the other 2 went running up the other end of the alley, kid him coming back. And as Don told me, he saw a 2x4 there in the dark. And when the guy came around the corner, he made a Christian out of him. He had a weapon with no serial numbers on it. Don grabbed the weapon, went back to Reno, and then he was driving her car, of course. Then he had to deliver the car to her in Santa Maria, to Diana Lively. So he starts driving to Santa Maria. He notices an oversized van following him about a quarter of a mile, mile after mile after mile after mile. He's into California by now. And at a certain location, this car, he's driving 75, 80. This van comes up real fast, comes up behind him, he's next to him, and he flips his mirror and a shotgun comes out the back window of the van. He realizes that they're going to blow the tire out and spin the car, and he's probably going to die, or something's going to happen, serious injury. So he slams on his brakes, and the van went on and came over into his lane, but he wasn't there, so the van flipped. And he is looking at the dust in his rearview mirror at the same time that a highway patrolman is coming from the other direction at 100 miles an hour. It was all planned to take place at that precise location, right? And Don goes on, delivers the car, and so on and so forth. He was an ex-cop from California, so he checked his contacts, and he found out that there was an accident there, and there was a fatality. He checked his contacts 6 months later. There was no record of the accident and no record of a fatality. This is the way they operate. This is what happened. Diana called me and thanked me for probably saving her life. I'm telling you the story because this information about me marrying her is on the internet, and I challenge anybody to find the marriage license, and I'll turn over my monthly retirement check. Or not all of it, just some of it, okay. So Diana called me. She says, Ted, I'm moving from Santa Maria to Hemet, and I would appreciate it if you'd escort me down and come help me move. So I got a friend of mine from Dallas who was in town. He and I went up and I helped her move. Went down to Hemet, spent a little bit of time in Hemet, and then I went on home. Diana told me some things that are really very scary and very shocking about her life as the wife of Anton LaVey. One of the things that really was shocking is they had a lion that was walking free around the house. And when they had a victim, they wanted to get rid of the evidence, they just threw the person to the lion. He'd eat it. Anyway, that's just one of the things that's on the internet. As I've mentioned some other things. But I've had so many people planted on me, government operatives. I feel like I'm the Garden of Eden, to be honest with you. That's right. For example, a fellow named Stu Webb. This is all part of their master plan to discredit me, so people like you won't listen to me. So a fellow named Stu Webb came to me. I ran for political office back in the 90s, and I lived in Las Vegas at that time. I need a place to stay for 4 days. Well, I take patriots in all the time, so I come on over and stay in my place. He stayed for 7 months. I gave him, and I fed him. I've even bought him a suit. I let him use my car, gasoline, the whole thing. I got to quit doing that, folks, because it gets me in trouble every time. But anyway, I finally told Stu, I said, I got my granddaughter coming to stay with me. You're going to have to get out of that third bedroom. I had an elderly lady living in the second bedroom who was from Ireland and a cripple, and I'd run into her in my travels, and I took her in too, and she ended up being an invalid. But anyway, Stu Webb left when I was out of town. stole 35 copies of Thanks for the Memories, which was Bryce Taylor's book. You remember that book? Bryce Taylor was the presidential model. And last time I checked the internet, Thanks for the Memory was selling on the internet for like $110. He stole 35 copies that I had. He stole my research, 8 or 10 boxes of my research. And it goes on and on and on. But Stu Webb when he walked out the door, when the next time I saw him, he said, "I'm going to destroy you and the Patriot community." And this is he's the one that says I was kicked out of the FBI for practicing satanic ceremony in the federal building. So much for Stu Webb. He's been discredited, so forget about him. Jim Kloberg, another person who was planning on me. I ran for a political office in Las Vegas in '96. And Kloberg was my campaign manager. And when the campaign was over, I was selling my DVDs and books and everything else to try to finance the campaign. Very expensive, by the way. And those of you who think it's easy to run for politics, it's not. It just to register in the primary across the country, if you're running for president, costs you more than $100,000. Okay. But anyway, after the campaign was over, I received a letter. I lost. I ran in I re-registered from Republican to Democrat so I could go to these conferences and take on Bill Clinton. Okay, he was president at that time and rerunning. And anyway, this lady wrote me a letter and she said, "I never received my DVD. Where is it?" And I said, "Well, send me a copy of your check and send me the flyer." And I found out that Kloberg made up his own flyer with another name, Gunderson for President or some name like that, had his own bank account, and the money was coming into his own post office box, okay, and he was putting the money in his pocket. Clear-cut election violation of the federal laws. And I immediately reported it to the U.S. Attorney and the FBI in Las Vegas. Nothing ever happened. I found out later that Kloberg was an FBI informant who'd been planning on me. Now the latest, again, now we're talking about disinformation specialists. The latest incident was really costly. A woman named Virginia McCullough, and she's from up here in Northern California, and she's been bashing me for years, and she finally made a big mistake. In 2005, I had to leave Las Vegas and go to Nebraska because I was being poisoned. I was sitting in my office. Actually, I had an office in my home, a condo. And I realized I wasn't thinking straight, and I was foggy, and I couldn't remember some things. And I'm saying, there's something wrong with me. I went down, took a test, and I found out I had arsenic and cyanide in me. And as a result of that, by the way, I have high blood pressure, and I'll be on high blood pressure medicine the rest of my life. But I said to my associate, Clarence Malcolm, who's my webmaster now, my first webmaster was murdered, the second one was set up and framed on child molestation charges. Chris Jones didn't do it. So I said to Malcolm, by the way, does anybody want to volunteer to be my fourth webmaster? Here you go. See me after the, okay? So I said to Malcolm, we got to get out of here. So within 2 weeks, I called John DeCamp. I'm sure you folks know the name John DeCamp. He's a great man, Lincoln, Nebraska attorney, and he and I worked on the Franklin cover-up case together. I called John DeCamp. And I said, John, I got a problem. I got to get out of here. And he said, well, come on back to my hometown, Claytonia, Nebraska. I'll guarantee there's not a person in this room that's ever heard of Claytonia, Nebraska. It's 196 people. It's about 5 blocks long and 3 blocks wide. And 196 people. They have a post office, a bar, and a bank. And that's it. That's their business section. So John said, come on back. I got a house I'll rent to you. So Clarence and I and his wife and his 8-year-old daughter, stepdaughter at that time, moved from Las Vegas to Claytonia, Nebraska. And John was quite surprised. He said, come on back. And 2 weeks later, I got a van in front of his house with furniture. I said, where do I go, John? And he made fun of that because he didn't know if I was going to come back or not. But John rented me one of his houses. Now, I'm going to tell you how much I rented it for. It's 4 bedrooms, 2 baths, third of an acre land, $550 a month. Doesn't sound like L.A., does it? No. So anyway, so there I am in Claytonia, Nebraska. And Malcolm and I and his wife and Linda and the daughter, stepdaughter, are, pumping out the DVDs, furnishing information when we can, educating people when we can, and so forth. All of a sudden, knock, knock, knock. Open the door, here's the police officer. We have received information. You are holding a child hostage here. We want to see the child. And I said, and Malcolm said, do you have documents, court documents, papers? No, out the door. And it was a female police officer. She slammed the door. She was really upset about that because we challenged her. So Malcolm says, we got to get out of here. So we moved 20 miles down the road overnight, registered the house in Beatrice, which is where we moved to, in his wife's maiden name, and about a week later, knock, knock, knock. And here is another police officer, only this time, Beatrice police officer. We have information that you are holding a child hostage here. We want to see the child. Court documents? No, out the door, okay? So I immediately go down and talk to the district attorney. Randy Rittenauer is his name. And I say, I'm telling Randy, what's this all about? He says, well, I'm receiving emails from some woman in California about this. I said, well, how would she know what we have going here in Claytonia, Nebraska? Well, we got to check it out. I said, no. I said, the woman's is Virginia McCullough. Isn't that right? And he didn't say yes, he didn't say no. He just went like this and nodded his head up and down. So as a result of that, Malcolm left Beatrice overnight and goes to Texas. And then from Texas, he ended up having surveillances on him like we've all had, those of us in the limelight, so to speak. And I sent him and the daughter and his wife to Panama to get him out of harm's way. And he's been down there. Now, what that did to me financially, is mind-boggling. I have not been able to get my DVDs out for almost a year, because this happened a year ago now, actually. And so I've got a bunch of back orders I'm in the process of putting together now. Malcolm, in the meantime, has moved back to the States. He's living in Pennsylvania, and we're going to be able to crank it out. But that's Virginia McCullough. Okay, another government operative. So no sooner did I neutralize Virginia McCullough, because I went public with this. It's on my website about Virginia McCullough. Then up pops Dr. Leonard Horowitz. Does anybody know that name? And I'm shocked, because Leonard Horowitz is telling me that in this 12-page document, I have a copy of it here, he's telling me that Ted Gunderson and others are serving Michael Aquino, former head of the Temple of Satan, the Church of Satan, and now the head of the Temple of Set, that I'm serving him? What does that mean? And also goes on and talks about me being involved in these various government activities, and I'm a CIA operative, and I'm also an FBI operative. And do you think I look like an FBI operative or CIA operative? No, of course not. As a matter of fact, I've been kicked out of the Ex-Agent Society because of the criticism that I've directed at the FBI. I want to make it very clear, there's a lot of good people in the FBI and the CIA. However, it's the people at the top, okay, that I have a problem with. Anyway, this 12-page document goes on and on and on, blasting me, and similar to the information that the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Anti-Defamation League said. I responded to Len Horowitz, and it's on the internet. I don't have a copy of it with me. And basically, I just told him, I said, you just exposed yourself, because you're accusing me of being a government operative and working for the government, and we're criticizing the government at the same time, so I'll be accepted in certain circles, and now you've come in with this. I neutralized Virginia McCullough, now I've got to deal with Leonard Horowitz. Leonard Horowitz is a government operative, absolutely no question. If you read this 12-page document, you will see. These are the tactics that they use. They criticize the government, at least some of the people that they pull out of the woodwork, in order that they will be accepted in patriot circles. And then these people criticize people like me. They think they can be accepted, and it discredits me. Now, is this COINTELPRO program and this disinformation program on the internet, has it affected my life? You bet it has. Because I'm not being invited to these big conferences anymore where I could give a lecture in front of 300, 400, 500 people. This is exactly what the rogue, covert, criminal government enterprise wants. That's why they do it. So what's the reward for me? Now, I'm going to tell you what's happened to me in the last 30 years. And I'm not telling you this because I'm looking for pity or I'm looking for sympathy or anything. These are facts. Okay? Now, Will Rogers said, what do you say? If it's true, what did he say? Does anybody remember what he said?
He doesn't know the man who didn't lie.
Huh?
No, something else. I'm sorry.
Anyway, I forget what Will Rogers said. I'll tell you what happened in the next lecture. Anyway, what's happened to me, I've had 3 contracts on my life. Okay? I've had 2 other probable contracts. And I will give you just a little detail about the contracts that were put on me so that you will understand it's not just talk right off the top of my head. I might mention that in 2 of these instances, through divine intervention, I did not go home. I lived in 500 South Kelton in Westwood. This was in the 1980s, or mid-1980s. And I had a door, I lived in a triplex, and my door opened up onto the street. The landlady who lived behind me on the 2nd floor came home one morning, 1:30 in the morning, and here's 2 guys sitting across from my front door in a car. And one of them gets out and walks over to her, do you know where Ted Gunderson lives? And I told her, if anybody ever asks about me, you don't know me. And of course she said no, she didn't know. Well, she told me that the next day. And I made some phone calls, and I learned that there was a contract on me. And fortunately, I do have some good sources, and it's kept me alive. But what it really has kept me alive is on that particular night, I didn't go home. I stayed at a friend's house at the last minute. So I say it's through divine intervention that I didn't go home on that particular night. So one of my contacts says, I used to work with, he gave me his name, who is known as the cocaine king of the West Coast. Let me go talk to him. Let's go talk to him. So there were 1, 2, 3, 4 of us, and we went to talk to the, quote, cocaine king of the West Coast. And we go in, the fellow comes to the door, lets us in. We had an appointment, it was on a Monday. He escorts us into the parlor, and then he takes us from the parlor into another room, and we sit down. And a little dog comes in about this big and smelled all of us and sat down at my feet and went to sleep. And the, quote, cocaine king of the West Coast comes in, looks at the 4 of us. My dog likes you, I like you. And I'm saying, I'm sure happy about that. To myself, of course. So he tells the other 3 to scat. And I had been hired before this by a fellow named Robert Ferrante, who came out of his office one night, about midnight, and a gunman steps out of the bushes with a ski mask on, fires 13 shots, I think, at him, hits him 5 times, he lived, and Robert Ferrante hired me to find out who tried to kill him. Well, earlier that evening that he came out of his office at 12:30 or so, his accountant came out, walked across the parking lot around 6:30, and there was a car parked with the back of the car against the building. And the fellow was just sitting there. Now, at the time of the shooting, a car similar to that was parked there and pulled out with the motor running. And there was another car in another direction, opposite of him, that was with his motor running. And the gunman ran and jumped in the other car, and then this first car took off. Well, if you know anything about contract killings, they will always have two cars, so the gunman can get in one or the other, depending on the circumstances. So I took the accountant aside, put him under hypnosis. By the way, if you do hypnosis for artist conception, it's much more effective. And it's unbelievable the detail that you'll come up with. I took the accountant aside. We did an artist conception of the fellow sitting in the parking lot at 6:30 that evening. And very good artist conception. I hired a former police officer who specialized in artist conceptions. So when I knocked on the door, the cocaine king of the West Coast, who do you think answers the door? The guy in the artist conception, right? But I'm saying, well, there's four of us. I don't think they're going to do away with all four of us. So that's just the fellow that let us in the parlor, and let the dog come in. So the cocaine of the West Coast tells the other three to scat out of the room and sits down with me, and he says, "How many children do you have?" Well, I know what the message meant. You know, if you screw up, your kids' lives are in danger. And I told him. Then he pulls this artist conception out. He had a copy of the artist conception. And he said, "Who gave this to you?" And I said, "If you're going to do harm to him, I'm not going to tell you. I'll take the heat myself." And he was kind of miffed about that. He said, "I didn't say I was going to do anything." So I said, "Okay, promise you won't, and I'll tell you." So I told him the story about the accountant and so on and so forth. And he said, "Okay." He said, "Let me make a phone call. I'll be right back." So he left the room, and he came back. He says, "You're right. You got a hit on you. I can take care of one of them. I can't take care of the other one." I said, "I got two hits on me?" "Yeah." So I said, "Well, take care of the one, and I'll see what I can do about the other one." And so he left and came back again. He said, "Okay, I made a phone call. Don't go home or to your office until Friday." This was Monday. So I lived in a hotel room that whole week with a gun under my pillow, and I didn't move. I paid cash for the room. That was before you had to furnish identification. And it's kind of interesting because every time somebody walked down the hall in the middle of the night, I would wake up. And it was after that that by the way, that hit was taken off, thanks to him. He called me later and asked me to do a favor about 6 months later, and I won't need to go into that. But the point of this story is divine intervention. I didn't go home that night. A friend of mine said, "Stay with me this night, and we'll go from there." And so anyway, I ended up I had some friends drive me to Dallas. I remember I slept in the back of the car, in the back seat of the car, for like 21 hours. That's how long it took to drive to Dallas, because I hadn't had any sleep in a week. And then while I was over there, I'm saying to myself, I got to get rid of this other head. This is all New World Order stuff. This is all Illuminati. Okay, they put hits out on people all the time. Don't bat an eye. So I'm over there, and I get a call from a fellow in Los Angeles. "Come over, I want to talk to you." And this particular person had some pretty good contacts because he knew about my situation. He knew I had two hits put on me at the same time. And long story short, this particular person was able to take the second hit off of me. That was just one. On another occasion, 1986, I said to myself, I've had enough cops and robbers in my life. I'm getting out, and I'm going to go in business for myself. Divine intervention, again. the good Lord wasn't going to let me get out of this work that I'm doing. And I invested every dime I had, and I lost it all. And so I had to go back in to private investigation work. I didn't have to because I had a pretty good retirement check. So this fellow, I was living with my business partner and his wife and kid. My business partner went overseas, went to Argentina, I think it was. And he was gone for a while. And then my daughter had a road trip, and I house sat for her. And on that particular night, an individual, and I found out later his name was Bill Mincer, known as Charles Manson II, came into the house about 11 o'clock. She was on the third floor, it was a tri-level, and heard him coming in. And the dog went bananas. She closed the door, went to the telephone to make a phone call. Didn't work because the phone down in the kitchen had been taken off the hook. And she sat there and waited it out, got her gun out. He didn't come upstairs. Again, I made some phone calls, and I didn't go home that night because when my daughter came back from her road trip, I was staying at her house, and we decided to watch a movie at the last minute. So, divine intervention. Absolutely no question about it. And then the other two probables are, I don't need to go into them, but there was a fellow who was hanging around my P.O. box for quite a while, and I'd have to send somebody else in to pick up my mail. This is all New World Order, as I said a few moments ago. This is all what they do. They kill people. And Kucinich, not Kucinich, but I forget the Congressman, huh? No, there's a congressman from Ohio, I think it's Kucinich. Yeah, he has asked for an inquiry into the CIA hit teams that are operating in this country today. Okay, he's asked for an inquiry, but nobody's paying any attention to him. That's just one. I can't tell you how many illegal burglaries, illegal entries I've had into my home. It's like Grand Central Station. They're in and out of there, and it's unbelievable. I took a trip when I was in Nebraska. I was gone for about 3 weeks. I came back, and I had my research, 500 boxes of research over a period of years, stored in the third bedroom. They helped themselves to 200 boxes of my research. Okay? They're in and out of my car on a regular basis. I can, right here in L.A., I park down, I remember parking downtown, and I came back, and they do this all the time, turn the direction signal on. I start the car up, and the direction signal's on. I had my car stolen twice. I had my brake lines cut. I have had 2 windows shot out when I was standing nearby. They were intimidating me. They weren't real bullets, fortunately. They were air bullets. And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to intimidate me. I've been poisoned in Las Vegas. I was poisoned. And what they did there, the only way they could have poisoned me is they had the condominium next to me, and they were pumping poison in through the air ducts. I had my right front tire come off when I was driving between Omaha and Lincoln, 60 miles, 75 miles an hour. The right front tire came off. Highway Patrol came, looked at it. It was John DeCamp's pickup truck, by the way. I had gone from Lincoln to Omaha to talk to a source. And the only way they would know that was by tapping John's telephones. And I found out, the highway patrolman looked at it, he says, hey, your lug nuts have been loosened. And they tried to loosen the lug nuts on the left front tire, but somebody must have interrupted them because they weren't successful there. They wanted both tires to come off at the same time. My mail's been opened, diverted, and intercepted. My phone was cut off once. And I called the phone company. I said, hey, you discontinued my phone. Why? And they said, well, we sent you a bill. You didn't pay it. I said, well, where'd you send it? They sent it to a fictitious address in Florida. Never heard of it. I've had mail disappear. People written to me, and I've never received it. Surveillances are surveillances are almost a daily occurrence. And what I do is I do U-turns on them and get around behind them and chase them. And they try to intimidate me. Look, I was in a gun battle in Memphis, Tennessee at the airport. If they're going to intimidate me, they're not going to intimidate me. I'm not afraid of them. I've dealt with terrorists when I was in the FBI. And I remember when back in about 90 or 91, they put a dirt bag out, just parked across the street, maybe 4 or 5 cars up. And I would see them there, and I'd put on my gun, go out and get in my car, drive by 3 miles an hour, stare them down, do a U-turn, 3 miles an hour, stare them down. Then I'd park in behind them. And they couldn't get out of there fast enough. One of them ran a red light. Then I chased another one and cornered him on the street, blocked him, and I reached under my front seat like I was going for a piece, and his eyes got big as saucers. And I was on a street that went up the hill and down. It was one way. I went up and down and parked at the bottom of the hill, and then he started coming up, and I was watching in the rearview mirror. I could see the top of the car, and when he saw me, he stopped and backed up the wrong way in a one-way street. By the way, I've got some pretty good license numbers, a lot of license numbers that I'm saving. My business has been sabotaged, Virginia McCullough. I've had telephone taps. I sued GTE back in the 80s, got an out-of-court settlement. I've had threatening phone calls. I came back from a trip once, and I got up in the morning. I was looking for a file on a desk, and I had a phone call, 827. The voice said, male voice said, "Did you find your file?" Click. They had a hidden camera in my house. I was gassed on the freeway, attempted gas on the freeway. They gassed my webmaster, Clarence Malcolm. I've interrupted 2 attempts to steal my car. I've had flat tires. In one instance, I had 3 nails in the same tire. That's a little more than a coincidence, I think. I've had my guns stolen. I had 4 guns stolen out of my house in Nebraska. I sleep with a gun under my pillow. I have a combat Magnum. And one day, just a couple of years ago, I check it regularly. I checked it, and somebody had come in and taken the bullets out of it. So if they came in on me, I was going to have to throw the gun at them, I guess. Cameras, they've taken pictures of me. My webmaster was hit with uranium-235. I know for a fact I've had a trash cover on me. My computer has been sabotaged. I've been expelled from the Ex-Agent Society. I talked about my plants, the disinformation program, McCullough, Horowitz, and so forth. Those are just the life of a person who dares to take them on. Also, I might mention that in the early 1980s, I had 4 investigations on me. I know because I applied through the Freedom of Information Act. And one of the reports came, they sent me back. It wasn't anything significant, a couple of pages on a report. And they said, in the interest of, quote, national security, we can't give you the full file. But it's kind of interesting because one of the reports at the end said that they consider me armed and dangerous. Okay, well, I am armed and dangerous with knowledge, right? Thanks. Thank you, sir. Pam Fawcett. They put a girl on me, Pam Fawcett. DEA and the FBI. I dealt with her on the phone for 6 months. She was in Modesto. Tried to set me up on a drug deal. And she called me one day and said, "I need to talk to you." She came down. I met her at the time. I think it was Hughes Market or Ralph's Market across from this place on Ventura Boulevard, the Sportsman's Lodge. And she told me that the whole story about how they had tried to set me up through her and drugs through her. And I said, "Pam, why are you coming over to my side now?" I had the names of the FBI agent and the DEA agents who dealt with her. She said, and I was trying to help her on the phone. I tried to help her with her 14-year-old kid. He got in trouble down in Florida. And she said, "I woke up the other morning and I realized you're the only honest son of a bitch I've talked to in 6 months." Those were her exact words. Pam took a polygraph, passed it, and last time I talked to her, she said there was a hit on her. Oh, here's Kucinich, Dennis Kucinich, that was it. This is in American Free Press, April the 6th, 2009. Dennis calls for probe of U.S. hit team. So, what do we have? Well, we have the NSA and the FBI have teamed up with AT&T and Verizon to spy on U.S. citizens. This is all documented. President Bush reauthorized a secret program more than 30 times to spy on Americans since September 11th, 2001. U.S. government NSA has tapped its entire internet system. FBI can hear everything you say even when cell phones are off. The code word for this program is Quantico. All payphones at Grand Central Station in New York are tapped. The Bush administration began spying on Americans 7 months prior to 9/11. The President authorized our intelligence agencies to database every citizen in the U.S. 7 months prior to September 11. Project Endgame, the rounding up of 775,000 Americans by the shadow government, began on February 24th, 2009. Two of my very closest friends, very frankly, have disappeared. I don't know what's happened to them. We have thousands of guillotines that were shipped in here from Japan in Atlanta, Georgia. We have 500,000 caskets that hold 40 bodies in each casket. We have 1,000 internment camps around the country. We have sensors on the major highways every quarter of a mile. I talked to one of the installers right here in California.
What was that?
Sensors. But that keeps track of your car. Sensors, yeah. Did I pronounce it right or wrong? That's right? Okay. Yeah, I went to school in Nebraska, so I have an excuse sometimes, okay? We have the Patriot Act. I don't tell you about the Patriot Act. I mean, I'm sure you're aware of that. Okay? The Constitution violations and the amendments that they've done away with through the Patriot Act are, you got them here someplace. All of them. Probably all of them. Yeah, here they are. The Sixth Amendment, right to a speedy trial. Eighth Amendment, no cruel and unusual punishment. 13th Amendment, punishment without conviction. It took 262 Republicans and 77 Democrats to kill the Bill of Rights. This is all part, as I said earlier, of the terrorist movement. I told you about the guillotines, the caskets. We have U.S. troops in the United States, Holloman Air Force Base, Air Force, German Air Force. A lady came up to me back in the 90s and said that she was from New Mexico. She deliberately dated a German airman from Holloman to find out what they were doing here. He said, when the revolution starts, we're going to strafe the cities. Beatrice, Nebraska, where I lived for a short period. Town of 12,500. They have an on the base there, they have an airport. The airport is the runway is more than a mile long. There's no commercial airplanes come in there, it's all private. They are expanding the length of the airport. Why? So bigger planes can land there, I guess. But there's no commercial planes coming in, over a mile long now. The chemtrails, one of my sources told me that the planes in the north, Midwest, chemtrails are out of the Air National Guard, Lincoln, Nebraska. I made a trip to the airport, and I found 4 giant airplanes with no markings on them on the runway at the Air National Guard. Another informant told me Fort Sill, Oklahoma is what they're using in the southwest United States. Okay, that kind of gives you, I think I laid the foundation pretty well, didn't I?
Yeah, really.
Yeah. Okay, that just tells you what they're after. Okay, I'm not the only victim. There's thousands of Americans out there. By the way, I've been shot with a laser beam twice in my back. Fortunately, they're not very good aims. And my webmaster, Clarence Malcolm, has been shot also. But now what I'm going to do, the rest of my time here, what time do we have? How are we doing on time? It's 9:20. 9:20? Okay, so I've been on here about an hour and a half. I'm going to tell you about one of my cases. And then in the lectures in the future, I will tell you about individual cases I've worked and investigated that absolutely without any question establishes there is a conspiracy and infiltration into the lower levels of the government all the way to the White House. And this is the John Van Meter case. On Halloween 2004, John Van Meter, a woodsman from Wisconsin, had attended a conference in Sonoma County, California. And after the conference, he was driving home, and he saw 5 or 6 automobiles, black automobiles, with people in them, driving into the woods. He did a U-turn and came back, and a safe distance from what was taking place, he could see a fire. He could see a girl in the nude tied against a tree. And most of the people there were in the nude. And he said, this is not right. So somebody shot at him. And he got his gun out. Being a woodsman, he carried a gun. And he shot back. Long story short, he shot and killed 4 of them, broke up the ceremony, and rescued the girl, carried her over and put her in the car. The others scattered, and he chased the leader into the woods and shot and killed him. Okay, he had a pretty exciting evening that night, didn't he? He looked at the body of the leader and took a card out, a little business card out, and on the back of it was a 202 area code. The next day he called, and a female answered, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The next day he called, and the line had been disconnected. And when he was chasing the leader through the woods, they had a running conversation, and the leader said, we have the police and the FBI in our hip pocket here. If you kill me, you'll live in a 10 by 10 cell the rest of your life. So John ends up reporting to the police, Sonoma County, and goes back home. And they filed charges against him, claiming that he filed a false report. And they waited 4 days to go out into the woods and search the area. The police did. And so he hires an attorney in Sonoma County, and the attorney says, don't come back here. It's corrupt. Law enforcement's corrupt. You'll end up serving time. The attorney worked out a deal with them, with John, to fine him $10,000 and a year probation, 2 years probation, I think, and no jail time. They said that he shot himself. Okay. He goes back to Wisconsin, and April the 19th, 2006, a year and a half later. Anybody remember that date? That's a really significant date in Oklahoma City, Waco. He goes out in the woods, and he's a woodsman at that. And two fellas come out, drive out, park the car, get out, and he hears one of them say, he's mine. He has another gun battle. He knocks one of them down 4 times, the other one down twice. And they had enough, they took off. He goes to the police, and he tells the police what happened. And they say, he shot himself. He was shot 9 times with 6 different weapons. His pickup truck had 25 bullets in it, and he shot himself. So John had a trial. They tried him. We brought an expert in from Madison. I went to the trial. We brought an expert in from Madison, Wisconsin, who said he could not possibly have shot himself based on the circumstances. And John was tried and convicted. And they changed their story from he shot himself to he lied to the police. John told me, sure, I had to lie to the police. I didn't trust him. Why would I not lie to the police? So that shows you, and by the way, he's placed on probation, and during the 1-year probation out of Wisconsin, somebody planted a marijuana plant in his garden. Obviously, they wanted the probation officer to find it. The probation officers came by regularly, searched his home without a search warrant, looking for guns, looking for booze. You can't have either one when you're on probation. And then last February the 6th, his house burned to the ground early in the morning. So that just shows you how the corruption has permeated down to the very lowest level, Sonoma County and Lincoln County, Wisconsin. This man could not possibly have shot himself. As I said, he was shot 9 times with 6 different weapons. I have a copy of the letter here that the girl wrote. By the way, she's in hiding. She changed her name several times. And nobody knows, other than John and a few others, about her whereabouts.
Was she kidnapped or?
Yeah, she was kidnapped. She was kidnapped out of a parking lot in Oakland. 4 guys came at her in daylight and shot her in the thigh with a needle. She lost consciousness, and they put her in a van. Would you like to have me read the letter that she wrote? Okay, I'm the woman from the satanic cult abduction case on Halloween. I'm scared to death of them finding out who I am, so I'm not coming forward. The only person I'm ever going to tell is my brother. By the way, she jumped in the car and drove into Oakland and called her brother. Her brother came and picked her up. She was in the nude, by the way. She had no clothes on. He thinks would be best if I stay anonymous, but he has convinced me to write down everything I remember exactly as I can and send it to the police. So this is what I'm doing. They were going to rape and murder me, and I hope they get caught. People need to know what's happened to me. I'm so scared they will find out who I am. I'm writing on an old typewriter, so it won't be on my hard drive. It started Saturday night. I was walking across the parking lot in Oakland. 4 guys got out of a car and grabbed me. They gave me a shot with a hypodermic needle in my thigh. I was unconscious for seconds. When I woke up, I had handcuffs on behind my back. My feet were tied together. The handcuffs were tied to something I couldn't move. They put tape over my eyes and my mouth. I didn't know where I was or how long I was there. I was thirsty and felt like I couldn't breathe. I had to go to the bathroom. I was terrified. I laid there and thought about what had happened to me over a long period of time. I'm not a religious person, but I prayed for the first time in my life for God to save me. I went to sleep and dreamed. In a dream, I saw a big white dog. It sat down, turned its head sideways, and looked at me. I felt like the dog was a girl dog, and she came to help me. I can't explain it any other way. Then I got up and ran away. I don't know why I'm even saying this. It just seems weird and real. I woke up again. I had to go to the bathroom so bad I finally gave up and urinated in my pants. It was awful. Then it was wet and cold. After a long time, I heard noises like a car door opening, and a couple of guys grabbed me. One guy said, "Bitch, pissed on the floor." The other guy said something like, "Shut up, clean it up, and load the stuff in." I'm pretty sure now I was in the van, in the back of a van. They took me into a search or something, or in the house or something. The guy said, "If you cooperate, we won't hurt you. If you struggle, we will kill you. Is that understood?" I nodded my head, yes. "What could I do?" he said. Would you like something to drink? I nodded yes, and they took the tape off my mouth and gave me some water or something. It tasted funny. They started to take my clothes off, and I was sure they were going to rape me. The guy said, "Just relax, we're going to give you a bath now." They guided me into a bathtub and washed me all over with a cloth and shampooed my hair. I was really scared. It was weird. They dried me off and blew my hair dry with a blower dryer and a brush. They put tape back on my mouth and put a white terry cloth robe on me. They set me down on the chair. I couldn't see anything because the tape on my eyes. I could see the voice. I could hear voices in another room. I was getting pretty sleepy. I think that there was something in the water they gave me. Then a couple of guys got to me. They took me out and put me in the back of the van and drove away. I knew there were other people in the van, but they didn't talk. They just played this loud, instrumental, heavy metal music. They drove me for a long time. I felt very sleepy. After a long time, the van stopped. The couple got me out. My feet were bare, and I was standing in dirt. I heard a lot of people talking quietly. I heard clicking noises in the van. A guy beside me said, "What are you doing?" The other guy said, "You know, getting ready for sanitizing after." Then the first guy said, "Dude, we haven't had the party yet." I thought it was so weird I remembered it. Then I heard a woman's voice say, "This is the sacrifice." She untied my robe and put her hands on my breasts. She said, how did she test? A guy said, "Perfectly." She put her body next to me. I could feel her, she was naked. She said to my ear, "I'm going to drink your blood." I felt suddenly very sick. I started to collapse. A big guy picked me up and walked with me. Then they set me down and took off the handcuffs. They tied my hands and arms and put a rope around my neck. They took the tape off my eyes. I was in the forest. They had tied me to a tree or something. I was so scared I was shaking. I knew I was going to die. 4 naked women walked to me. One was wearing chains with rings in her nipples, and she had a big knife. She ripped the tape off my mouth and touched my breast with the knife. Then she jabbed at my face repeatedly with the knife. I was terrified. I wanted to kill her, the bitch. They tied the rope open behind me. They touched me. I don't want to be graphic, but they did sexual things to me. They made me have an orgasm. Then they did things to each other and masturbated and had wild orgasms, the bitches. This was the worst, awful women were doing this to me. I hope they all get terminal disease and rot in hell. Some guys unrolled a big plastic sheet in front of me and made a fire. It was getting dark. A bunch of people gathered in front of me. They were all naked, and they started chanting some weird language. A man came and stood in front of me. He was older than the others, maybe 30. He was over 6 feet tall and a real lean build. His hair was almost black, so was his beard. He had weird eyes. Somebody was behind me and pulled the rope tight on my neck. He had his hands on my breast. I stared at him. He stared at me and never blinked. I couldn't help looking into his eyes. It was like hypnosis. He put me in a trance. It was like staring at a snake. He began to put his penis in me. Then I heard loud yelling and guns shooting. The snake-eye man jerked away from me and stood looking through the forest towards the noise. Everybody ran to the trees. The snake man poured water on the fire and walked away quietly. Then I heard him say, "Kill her." A naked man came forward towards me with a knife. A man came running up with a silver gun and shot him right in the front of me. He was big and tall, old man, and he had a white beard. That's John Van Meter, by the way. That's the one that was tried. And he had a white beard. I heard a loud bang behind me. I saw the shot hit the old man in the side of his stomach and knocked him down. He shot back multiple times while laying down and got up, started cutting the rope on my arms and with the knife. Somebody else shot at us, and the man shot back. Then he said something like, "Hold on, girl, I'll get you loose," or something. I fell down. The man picked me up with his arms around my waist and walked away fast. He shot me his gun twice and yelled very loud, "No more harm will come to this girl." Then he said something about coming straight from God to kill them all. He called them sons of bitches and said he was going to kill them all. I'm pretty sure that's what he said. I think he scared them. Nobody shot at us anymore. We got in the car on the road. I think he asked me if I could drive. I said yes. He put me in a car and said something fast things. He put me in the car and said some fast things to me. All I really heard was "Go home and stay anonymous." I couldn't believe he was going with me, wasn't going with me. I couldn't believe I was going to live when I was so sure I was going to die before. He wanted me to go, but I asked him, "Are you an angel?" end quote. I'll never forget his eyes. He had blood on his face, but his eyes glowed brightly blue, like they were fluorescent or something. He said, "No, but one sent me to you." He said, "Now go, I'll call the cops," and slammed the door. I hated to leave him. I felt safe with him. I don't know why he wasn't going to go with me. I drove as fast as I could. I almost ran off the road a couple of times. I don't know where I was. Even when I finally got to the highway, I went the wrong way until I realized where I was and turned around and went home. When I really got home, it was really late. I was still shaking and I had blood on me where the wounded old man carried me. I felt sick for him. I found out later that nobody would even knew I was gone. I couldn't believe it. I was hurt by it until I realized it was my own fault. Then this was the payback for all the times I fought with my parents over them wanting to know where I was going every minute. I hope the newspaper prints this so I can say to the kids, stop fighting with your parents. There is a reason why they want you to know where you are. My brother and I took the car and parked it in Berkeley. He said he'd call the cops and tell them where it was. We looked at it in it to see if we could find any who belonged to it. It was weird. There was nothing in the glove box or ashtray. No litter on the floor, nothing. Nobody's car is this clean. The only thing in it was 4 black sweatshirts and 4 black sweatpants, all identical. We opened the trunk and all that was in there was a used syringe. Then it hit me. This red Pontiac was the car the guy got out of who abducted me. They must have put me in the trunk. We're going to have the syringe test and see what they shot me with. Also, when I was showering, I noticed a painful needle mark in my forearm. Then I remembered how one bitch said, "How did she test?" They drew blood from me while I was unconscious to test for what, AIDS? Then I remembered how that guy said exactly perfect, and I wonder if it was something else. They really scared me. I'm really sick and frightened for the man who saved me. I don't have a TV and haven't been calm enough to watch for anybody else. My wonderful brother has been on the run and hadn't heard anything definite either. I learned last night how you can tell a lot about a man who's looking real close into his eyes. The snake man and the old man who saved me were exactly the opposite. You can see it in their eyes. What I remember most of is the shiny blue eyes of the man who saved me. He reminded me of my late grandfather. I want him to live because he's a good man who somehow miraculously saved me, and because I went down to write in the newspaper and explained to me why he looked like my grandfather. I can't think of him dying, and I'm scared to death of what's going to happen. I know now why he stayed there. He was mad as hell, and he wanted to kill them. My grandfather had a bad temper, too, for bad people. I hope he does kill them. I know these snakes did this before to others like me, and if they live, they will do it again. I especially want the snake eye man to die. I never want to see him again, ever. People like this can't be rehabilitated in prison. I can never forgive them. It took me all afternoon and all night to write this. I hope it makes sense to someone, whoever reads it. I had to take a lot of breaks before crying. The sun will be up soon, and it will be another day. My brother is leaving soon to mail this away from my home. I don't even want these snakes to know the zip code I live in. Then he's going out to the forest where I think I was to look for the man who saved me. I'm going to stay home and pray for God to save this man. He saved me. I hope we will save the man. He will save the man who is sent to do this. I don't know if this will help catch the snakes who tried to rape and kill me. I tried hard to remember anything I could. I'm still so shaken up, I can't think I'll ever be normal again. That's it. There's 50 to 60,000 human sacrifices a year by satanic cults in this country. Okay, I have that from very reliable sources, 3 different satanic sources. So basically, what are the solutions? What are the solutions? Elect our own people to office? Excuse me. The right to bear arms, Second Amendment. Take control of the money, abolish the Federal Reserve. take control, educate the sheriffs, take control of as best you can. They're the highest ranking law enforcement officer in each county. Abolish unnecessary federal agencies. This reduces the government budget and expenses. Repeal all unconstitutional acts, and then educate, educate, educate. Missing children is another issue. I won't go into that. I think the time has just about run out. But CPS can come around, as they almost did with us in Claytonia, Nebraska, on an anonymous tip and take your child away from you. And this is in direct violation of the Fourth Amendment, the right to be secure in your home against unreasonable search and seizure. The Sixth Amendment, to face your accused. You don't ever face your accused. Seventh, trial by jury. And eighth, excessive bail. In the future, I will be discussing the truth about the Al-Qaeda terrorist movement, the McDonald case in detail, Victor Glestian murder, cover-up by the FBI, ATF, and the LA County Sheriff's Office. Captain Jeffrey Digman murder, he was head of a task force to expose drugs in the Marine base in Camp Pendleton. Not Camp Pendleton, but what's the one in San Diego? That's the... Camp Pendleton, okay. The Franklin cover-up, where they were taking kids out of Omaha orphanages, foster homes, flying them to Washington, D.C. for sex orgies. McMartin preschool case, the Art Bell lawsuit, which is a phony lawsuit, and a cover-up by the FBI and the LAPD in another case. Anyway, it's been a pleasure being here tonight. I want to thank you all. I was just got out of the hospital recently, and I had $800,000 hospital bill. Would anybody like to volunteer to pay that for me? Actually, I'm responsible for 20% of it. So if you folks, yes, question.
Why don't you do an A for B on that?
A what?
An A for B, acceptance for value.
How's that? I don't know.
Use the accusant number on the back of your social security number. We got a microphone here, Max. Get a hand first.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. Thank you.
The way to get back at to them is use on the back of your social security card is an accusant number. Accusant number is a attachment to a federal ID bank account. Probably have millions of dollars in it that you don't know anything about. You should look into this. You can pay off a house, pay off loans, pay off credit cards, pay off bills of enormous amounts. People are doing it. People are learning how to do this. It's associated with the federal government, and there are ways to find out more about it. It's something that we should all know about. So
That's great. Thank you very much.
It's
On the back of my social security card, okay.
Back of your social security number is a federal ID number.
Okay,
It's
that's
attached to your
great.
bank account. And you're
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes, any other questions?
No, go ahead.
You can come to the mic, sir. Just come here. Okay. Ted, we were wondering if talk a few things about current events, about the terrorism in America right now a little bit. If you could speak like a few minutes on that.
Yeah, I actually did touch on this, Wendy,
Okay.
Earlier in my lecture.
Okay.
But this is all planned in order to pass the, hang on a minute. This is all planned. Yeah. The terrorist movement is organized and planned in order to pass a terrorist movement. I mean, I call it the terrorist bill. It's actually, they call it the Patriot bill. I call it the terrorist bill. Also the Homeland Security. And what I'm concerned about is that, we're going to have a rough road ahead for all of us in this regard. Yes.
Okay, my question to you is then, I was kind of busy, I didn't hear all the beginning of it, sorry. My question to you is, a buddy of mine and we're talking, and then I talked to another friend of mine tonight. We're thinking, where would possibly they do a second 9/11? It won't be necessarily towers, but some type of incident. And we were wondering what your thoughts on, they're trying to get the highway through, that great North America highway, and that Spain owns, but they can't get the people off the land. So if they were to do something in the Midwest to get the people off the land so that they could do this highway from Mexico, Texas, all the way to Canada, and then of course you would separate the America because you'd have the East Coast and the West Coast, and you have this highway between. Do you think it's possible that they might hit the Midwest for this highway that they're trying to get in?
The information I have now, and it's from a good source, is that there are 2 nuclear bombs in the United States, and my source believes that the targets are going to be the Capitol building and Wall Street. Okay? Wall Street, gray, yeah, okay.
Could they just focus on Goldman Sachs?
Yeah, could they just focus on Goldman Sachs, yeah. Also, I have information, reliable information, that there are 37 surface-to-air missiles that were smuggled into the United States back in 2001 that came up from Guatemala to Canada and then into the United States. They came into the United States in 4 different private airplanes. We don't know where they are. But can you imagine with 37 surface-to-air missiles if they shot down commercial airplanes simultaneously around the country? That would be a pretty serious situation. Yes, question.
A couple of questions. What do you know the latest on any information with regards to the former Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino? And go ahead and answer that, and I'll follow up with this next one.
No, I don't know the latest information. I know that he had an international convention in San Francisco here not too long ago, and I went up along with Doug Millar and Peter Cherniff, and we demonstrated outside on the sidewalk outside the hotel, and the police came along and arrested Peter and Doug and didn't arrest me for the demonstration. But he was there, and his wife, what's her name, Zena?
I believe something like
that.
Yeah,
Zena. She was there also, and the hotel security didn't like what we were doing, but we did it anyway. So I don't know, but I know that he's with NSA. If you check the internet on him, he's a top NSA official.
Oh, is he?
That's what I understand.
He's officially in the NSA now.
Yes.
Wow. The other question I have is with trying to figure out a solution for what's going on. Obviously, education is a big part of it, and being able to get the word out. However, based on your story, it appears that getting the word out puts a great big fat target on you. How do you find the balance?
I don't worry about the balance. I just keep going forward. I'm like the energy bunny rabbit.
So
banging on the drum.
But most of us don't have the privilege of being former FBI with all these different contacts and ways to keep yourself safe. So what do you suggest for people like the layman guy out here who ends up with a target on?
Well, just get the research and pass it out to your friends. You can send it to them anonymously if you want to, But we're all targets. We're all going to be targets eventually. Everybody in this room. I'm sure we have informants in here. Hi, guys. Give me your Social Security number and I'll give you some free DVDs. Okay? And your date of birth. Okay? Yeah.
Hi there. This is about Dr. Len Horowitz. And you're saying he's a disinfo agent. Do you know why specifically he's attacking you?
Oh, yeah, he's attacking me because I think he's a government operative. That's his assignment. Look, Virginia McCullough came after me, and I neutralized her by going to the DA and finding out who she was. She anonymously, it should have been an anonymous phone call.
Sure.
But she made the mistake of sending emails to the district attorney, Randy Rittenhour, so he knew who she was. And he, without telling me verbally, orally, he nodded his head yes. So I neutralized her, so he's just the next guy in line to come after me.
Because I seen a video of him where he was interviewing Dr. Gallo, the discoverer of AIDS, and he did a good job on that. And I thought...
I don't understand what you're saying. Go ahead, speak slowly.
Len Horowitz, he actually confronted Dr. Robert Gallo at a conference one time and accused him of being a founder, a creator of AIDS. And I thought that's quite a bold thing for him to do. And now he's turned around and he's attacking you. I thought that was a bit strange. I mean, I don't see his motivation for attacking you. Why would he do that?
That's his assignment. That's his assignment, is to neutralize me, try to neutralize me, keep me from giving lectures all over the country. There's a possibility I'll be doing a lecture tour in Europe, by the way, after the first of the year. But those people are more receptive as a group than they are in this country. They know more about what's going on than we do here because the mainstream media. By the way, on February the 9th, I don't think I mentioned this in my lecture. February the 9th, 1917, Congressman Callaway, did I say this in the lecture? Announced that the J.P. Morgan interests had taken over 29 of Americans' major newspapers in order to control the press on March the 15th of 1915. 1913, let me see. February the 9th of 1917 was 1913, I think it was, yeah.
It's not possible that Len's just confused or he's just said the wrong thing. I don't know.
Leonard Horowitz?
Yeah.
Oh, no. He's just a government operative. He's one of the boys.
It's hard for me as a newbie to understand who's doing the disinfo and everything else. And
that's why they chose him to be, because he has credibility. I always thought all along he was my friend until I read this 12-page document.
Wow.
Yeah. No, it's like, they put people out there claiming to be patriots, and instead of patriots, they're actually stirring up trouble. The FBI is notorious for, they plant informants in with groups, and they advocate violence, and they go out and commit the violence. This happened in West Virginia, I think it was. And everybody gets arrested. Do you think the FBI informant's going to be? Yeah, he's arrested, but they let him out the back door.
So when will you be giving a talk on Al Qaeda? That was something I was really interested in.
I don't understand what he's saying.
Are you good?
Al Qaeda?
Yeah. Yeah. When?
You want me to talk about it?
No. When will you be giving your talk on Al Qaeda?
Oh, on Al Qaeda, I don't know. It's up to Wendy when she'll have me back, or else I'll do a DVD. I'll do my own DVD on it.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, okay. Well, the whole terrorist movement it's all planned. It's part of the master plan by the Illuminati. New World Order Illuminati. Yes. I apologize because when I handled that skyjack in Philadelphia, I stood under 3 jet engines were running, and I had hearing loss. So sometimes it's difficult for me to understand. Yes.
Earlier in your talk, you mentioned the aims of the Illuminati, and you said one of them was to gain control of the media, to control the public mind. Well, I noticed in the United States and everywhere, the media is in the hands of Jews. So what is the relationship between the Illuminati? The Illuminati were formed in Germany by the Rothschild family and so forth. So what is the relationship? Who's the boss? Is it Rothschild? Is it some who?
I don't know exactly who's the boss, okay? But I can tell you this. When you make a note of this, MJ12, Magic 12, and go home and check it on the internet. MJ12 are 12 individuals behind the scene who are actually running the country in this United States. And this is MJ12, Magic 12, MJ12.
Not 1912, MJ12.
No, MJ, M like Mary, J like John.
You mean that's flying saucer business?
No. In 1947, Harry Truman and the National Securities Act established a committee of 12 outstanding, prominent individuals, outstanding by their standards, not ours. And anyway, these are the 12 men, and if one of them, they're not appointed by the president, they're within their own circle, and if one of them gets sick or dies or something, they decide among themselves who will replace him. And MJ12 has been active since 1947. I've got a terrorist intelligence report I'm putting out right now. It's 100 pages long, by the way. And those are the boys behind the scenes. And so those are the ones that, by the way, Cheney is...
So give me the relationship between them and Rothschild.
Well, I don't know if Rothschild is one of the members or not. We have a fellow here who does know who some of the members are, but he's not ready to come forward. As far as the Jews and there's a difference. The Jewish religion is a very good religion. I mean, I'm not a Jew, I'm a Christian, but they have a lot of good points. But we're talking about the Zionists, not the Jews, not the Jewish, not the really religious people. And so be it, that's the way it is. But MJ12 are the ones that are calling the shots in this country. Yeah, question?
Yes. I know you're our esteemed speaker tonight, but I thought earlier you said that you were in charge of the group that neutralized the Black Panthers. And it's my understanding that it came out in the church hearings or some subsequent hearing that they were neutralized by death squads from the FBI who went and killed them in the middle of the night while they were sleeping. Am I mistaken?
No, they were talking about the Hoffman case in Chicago, and that was the Chicago police that killed him, not the FBI.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So you're saying categorically that you were not involved with any death squads of the FBI?
No, I wouldn't even think of it.
Okay.
Not under any circumstances. If I go into any detail on the Black Panthers, I'll give you an example, a quick example. COINTELPRO, okay? We sent an anonymous letter to the Secretary Treasurer of the Black Panther chapter in New Haven, told him that the chairman was having an affair with his wife. We sent an anonymous letter to the chairman saying that the Secretary Treasurer was embezzling money from the chapter. COINTELPRO. Worked. Okay.
But if that's as nefarious as it gets, that's pretty benign by the standards that we're used to dealing with.
I know, but look, it's happening to me. It's not very benign to me because I'm not being invited to Conspiracy Conference 2009, some of these other, Steve Hempling's group up in Santa Cruz. They've neutralized me across the board. People believe that I married Anton LaVey. Some people do. Some people don't have any sense. Anton LaVey's widow. I saved her life. Some people believe that I was kicked out of the FBI for practicing satanic ceremonies in the federal building. That's not true. I mean, not even true, but some people believe it.
Well, thank you for coming here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming tonight, Mr. Gunderson.
Thank you, sir. Call me Ted.
Okay. My question was from hearing you read the narrative about the witchcraft, and, it got me thinking about this lady, J.K. Rowling, that's the author of the Harry Potter books, and it got me thinking about Skull and Bones and the Bohemian Club, which I'm sure everybody knows about here. But the thing is, look at who we have, on the world scene. We've got Obama, and we've got David Cameron, in England. And, you look at those guys, and it looks like, they might have come out of some Harry Potter school. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, it seems funny, but, the people behind the scenes might have picked them, say, 5, 10, and just, brought them up and said, okay, this is the circle and the goals that we want for you, and I just, they're young, and, it just makes me wonder because, you look back at, and I'd like to get your, opinion on this. You look back at the youth, how they just, just came up, the right doors were open. Both of them are relatively very young. And then you have this woman who is focused in on our youth, and the media, at least the media in the States, can't seem to sit down and do a documentary on her or interview her. She just seems to float around, and you never think about her until another movie's out directed at all these kids. I'd like to get your opinion on that.
Well, time and time again, we see Hollywood coming out with a movie. People think it's fiction, it's not true, and yet 5, 10, 8, 15 years later, whatever it might be, it comes to pass. And so it makes me think, hey, do you think people in Hollywood know what's going on ahead of time? Well, I think we do, most of us here. Even though I'm talking to the choir, this choir is knowledgeable if you've been coming to the Granada Forum on a regular basis, yeah. Yes, sir.
Yes, I just wanted to thank you personally. You've been a
Beg your pardon?
I want to thank you personally.
Oh.
You've been a real personal hero of mine for 2 years now, and thank you very much for continuing to speak out as you do, even in 82 years old?
82, yeah,
okay.
82.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My first question is, you mentioned 2 nuclear devices. Are those nuclear devices the South African nukes that I've read a lot about and heard a lot about, that was a backdoor deal with Israel and South Africa? Are those the two nukes you're referring to?
According to my source, they're the size of a thermos bottle. And the size of a thermos bottle.
Okay. Are those part of the backdoor deal with Israel that they did with South Africa to build 10 nuclear devices, and there are 2 of them left I've read up on?
Yeah, I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, and then towards the end of your lecture, you mentioned trying to win your sheriff to your side. And I've learned a lot about corruption in LA County.
Oh, yeah.
And how do you reach Sheriff Leroy Baca? How do you win a sheriff to your side when it appears like he's corrupted, by the Department of Homeland Security? How do you go about trying to help win a sheriff to your side so our county is protected? Any advice on that?
The only thing I know about sheriff's offices is that, other than what I read in the newspaper, is that I know for a fact on that one case I had, the Victor Galustian murder, he was blown out of the hard top of his Buick driving down the road, that they, along with the FBI and BATF, covered up the case. Other than that, I don't know anything about Baca and the rest of the people here. All I know is we have a huge cover-up and we have a huge conspiracy here. Let me ask you a question. Did I, based on what I said tonight, did I convince you that there is a conspiracy?
Yes.
Okay. Because think of it this way. Private enterprise, right? If they invest money, they want a return on their money. There's no return on the money of these people running around chasing me on surveillances. You follow what I'm saying? In other words, there's no return. And who could finance all these operations that have been directed against me? Not only me, but other people, numerous other people. Who could finance that? It's got to be through the covert drug operation. It's got to be through child kidnappings and so forth. So private enterprise, they want a return. You think General Motors or Macy's or somebody's going to invest money to come out and try to discredit me? No, they're not going to do that. So think of it that way. That's pretty solid information, I think. Yes.
Okay, I want 2 questions. Number 1 is the FBI hit teams. Are they the FBI that are employed right now by the FBI, or could they be ex-FBI people that have their own security companies? I
don't think that the FBI is hiring or using their own people for a hit team. I don't know if the FBI has a hit team. The hit team is based on everything that I've seen is by the military intelligence. So are you saying that they kind of just contact the military, like the Army, to do the hit? Yes. Okay. There's people inside, I think it's mainly military intelligence. McVeigh, Oklahoma City, right? He wrote a letter to his sister saying, and this appeared in the Dallas Morning News, that he had been approached by the CIA to be involved as a contract killer. This is in black and white. And also to work on the CIA drug operation. Okay, now the second question is the German military that's in our country right now. You said that when the revolution starts, are they going to try and disarm us, or are they just going to fight with us, or what? Is who going to, who? The German, you said the German troops? Well, we got not only German troops here, based on information I've picked up and researched, that we got other nations here. We got, I think, Swedish troops in Colorado. The reason I say that is because a hunter went into the woods to do some hunting here a couple of years ago, and he was approached by a group of men in uniform, and he said they had Swedish accents. Okay, and then what are they going to do exactly? That's what I want to know. Well, I don't know either, but I'm telling you what I think they're going to do. Why do you think they're extending the runways? The runways of where? In small airports. I didn't know they were. Yeah, I mentioned the Beatrice, didn't I mention that? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Beatrice Airport, the runway is over a mile long, and they're extending it. And there's no commercial traffic coming in there. Okay. Okay, what I think the plan is, I have no idea if this is true or not. I think there are plans. First of all, we've been labeled red, blue, and green. Red are going to be picked up and immediately executed. By the way, a top government official has made the statement that the best way to harvest body parts is through the guillotine. Mm-hmm. In 1995 and 1996, the Georgia legislature passed a law that prisoners who were sentenced to death for crime could choose the guillotine as their means of being executed. It's kind of ironic that they have that law in the books in Georgia in 1995-96, and now they're sending thousands. They put thousands of guillotines in there now. That's all has to have been planned.
Okay.
Yeah. Huh? I can't hear you. What's the blue and the green? Oh, blue and green are. This is. I mentioned.
We're color coded.
Color code for people. They know everybody here. Oh, probably 99% of it. And there's another theory that I have. They're getting rid of the old cars, aren't they? Yeah. Okay, why? It's because they can't trace them on the sensors.
They don't have GPS systems.
Yeah. Bring your car in, we'll give you cash. They don't want these old cars on the highway. They want to keep track of us. And if they don't keep track of you through your car, they keep track of you through your cell phone from up above.
2 quick questions.
Yes, sir.
One's a yes or no. I recently saw Aaron Russo's Mad as Hell. Was that you in the front row? Aaron Russo's Mad as Hell?
I can't understand your muffled.
I recently saw Aaron Russo's film Mad as Hell.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That was you, right? You were sitting in the front row.
Well, yeah,
okay.
I think I was.
Okay. I recognized that. I said, that looks like Ted. Anyway, my real question is, this the story that broke Monday, they said there was some type of missile or something, and then they said it was a contrail, and do you have any insights to what that was?
I don't have any inside information on that. I don't have any idea what it is. All I know is what I read in the paper, and I don't think anybody in the news media know. I don't know if they do or not. I don't have any idea. But we have Point Magoo out there. They launch missiles out of Point Magoo on a regular basis. Yes, sir, question.
In relation to your work, the satanic cult stuff, okay, a guy named Eric John Phelps talks about the Vatican assassins and the idea that the Jesuit priests and the Black Papacy, or the Black Pope, that these are the guys that are above all the other secret organizations. I just wondered if you had any information that would confirm or deny that.
Not really. I don't know. I wish I could answer that question. But I've heard a lot about the Vatican being involved, and you've used the usual stuff, and the Zionist Jews, and I know that all I know is the MJ-12's active. If we can get, I say the names of MJ-12, the 12 people, are known to some people, but the people that know about it don't want to come forward with it right at this time. It's not healthy. Okay.
My question's about Bohemian Grove. As we all know, they do a mock child sacrifice there in their cremation of care. Do you have any knowledge or belief as to whether or not a real sacrifice is occurring somewhere there at the same time?
I can tell you this. Paul Benassi, in the Nebraska case, Franklin cover-up, he was one of the kids, 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, that worked with the network that kidnapped the children. He was involved in the Johnny Gosch kidnapping case. And he was used in parks, shopping malls, and so forth, to attract other kids his age over to the car, would be parked close to the car. He'd be working close to the car. And the adults would grab him and throw him in the back seat. Paul Benassi, I have a 5-hour interview with Paul Benassi, by the way. It's available, I think. It might be on YouTube. But people tell me they see me on YouTube all the time. I'm computer illiterate, so I don't know what's on there. But Paul Benassi told me that he was part of the network that was involved in kidnapping kids, okay? He also told me that he and another kid in the network were put in a cage in front of the owl at Bohemian Grove with a kid that had been kidnapped. They performed sexual acts on him and then were ordered to kill him. This is for snuff film. And
Was that during the ceremony itself?
It was, I don't know exactly when that was, but he was there probably during the ceremony, I would say. They wouldn't just let him go back there on his own. Yeah, I would say probably during the ceremony. And these snuff films sell for like $100,000, private collections. The kids are sold for $50,000 on an auction block. Paul has attended 6 auctions, as few as 6 and as many as 36 kids, boys and girls, mostly young kids, were auctioned off for up to $50,000 each. It's big business.
But wasn't the real purpose to compromise the people there? I mean, you know, they're doing a snuff film, and you have these, you know, leaders there, and now they're all compromised.
Well, I don't think they're going to be compromised because nobody knows about it. It's all secret. But the real purpose, I think, is for snuff films, and also this is part of their belief, the satanic belief.
Thank you for your enlightening talk. I think you've given us a lot to think about. I was hoping for a little clarification on 2 points. Can you say anything more about the significance or projected use of some of these internment camps and plastic coffins? And can you say anything about whether websites like WikiLeaks might be contributing to a disinformation agenda?
The first question is about the internment camps. What's the second question?
Programs like WikiLeaks or websites like WikiLeaks, do you think they'd be contributing to education or disinformation?
I don't follow your question.
WikiLeaks. It's a
With the
website.
elite?
Right.
You mean the internment camps?
Right. No, forget the WikiLeaks question. Can you speak a little bit more about the internment camps, please? Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry. Again, I have a hearing problem. I apologize. Well, the internment camps, I mean, I think it's on the internet, and they are renovating and refurbishing the old World War II Japanese camps where they interned the Japanese. And I picked this up from several sources that these internment camps are out there. The biggest one, I understand, is in Alaska, where they could supposedly be able to hold 1 million people. These would be probably the blue or the green, probably the green. They're coded at red, blue, and green, right? The red will be eliminated immediately. The blue, I think, is for rehabilitation. The green, are not a problem for the New World Order boys.
One more question, Ted.
Okay, one more question, Mr. Charles.
Hey, Ted. Thank you for tonight. I wanted to ask you if you were aware that, from what I've heard, that Louis Jordan West, who is an MK Ultra architect, was just about the only person allowed to speak with Timothy McVeigh, and I'm wondering if you know about that, if you could talk about it a bit.
Yes, I do. I just happen to know about that. As a matter of fact, I knew Jolly West. He's head psychiatrist at UCLA. And in the 1991s, when I was involved in exposing the tunnels under the McMartin School, he called me and wanted to have lunch with me. I had lunch. I knew what he was after. He wanted to know what I knew. And of course, I didn't know anything, right? Or what I knew, I didn't tell him. I'll put it that way. I know for a fact, we got to wind up, that he visited McVeigh in Oklahoma City and also in Denver, Colorado. I know for a fact. I learned that from one of his staff members.
And he was an MK Ultra architect, I believe.
He and Sidney Gottlieb were MK Ultra architects, yes. They both died within a couple of months of each other. This is a wrap, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Let's give a warm round of applause to Ted Gunderson, ladies and gentlemen. If you'd like to make a little more donation to Ted, there's a bucket in the back. We thank you for your time. Also, we're going to DVD this. If any of you guys have a copy of this tonight, it'll be made available in the next few minutes. We want to thank you so much for coming to the Granada Forum. We will keep our website up to date for the thing. Of course, this Saturday is the G. Edward Griffin thing from 1, 4, and 7. 1, 4, and 7. And thank you so much for this kind of Granada Forum. We thank you so much, and God bless. Bye-bye. Again, we're going to DVD this right now. And
1st, 1776, Adam Weishaupt, a defrocked priest, announced the 25 goals of the Illuminati. And I'm just going to say very briefly about the Illuminati, because there will be some people who will watch this lecture on DVD and will not know about it. But at that time, the 25 goals: corrupt the youth through sex and drugs, right? Look at what's happening to our society today. Control the press, the mainstream media, elect your own people to office. If you can't elect your own people to office, put your agentures or advisors in, Illuminati advisors, so you can control, to a degree, the person who represents the people, or whatever the situation might be. But I have, this, by the way, this is documented in a book called Pawns in the Game by William Guy Carr. He was a lieutenant, a commander, excuse me, not a lieutenant, but a commander in the Navy, retired, the Canadian Navy, who wrote this book. He couldn't understand why we had to have so many wars and so many problems, and so he did his research and wrote this book. Now, here in right after Oklahoma City bombing, by the way, one of my lectures down the road will tell you all about the terrorist movement in this country, because it's all, the whole thing is planned. It's an inside job. It's planned to pass the Patriot Act, set up Homeland Security, and so on and so forth. But that'll be separate. But Brian Gumbel, the famous, well-known morning talk show host, and right after Oklahoma City, was interviewing Jim Nichols, Terry Nichols' brother, Terry Nichols, co-defendant of Oklahoma City with McVeigh. And I had given Jim and his family my report. I have a 222-page report. And I gave it to him. And in the interview with Brian Gumbel, he says on national television, "Have you read Ted Gunderson's report?" And Brian Gumbel says, "Oh, he's just a conspiracy theorist," right? Well, that's not right. I'm a conspiracy realist. There is a conspiracy. This lecture is dedicated to all the corrupt politicians, the judges that allow guilty people to go to jail deliberately, and my second webmaster is a victim of this. Not only the politicians, and the judges, but the bureaucrats who investigate these matters: CIA, FBI, military intelligence. The real, most serious culprits of all are the military intelligence. NSA, they're keeping track of all of our phone calls, of where we are every minute of the day. But when our forefathers established the three branches of the government, executive, legislative, and judicial branch, they had no idea that down the road, years later, there would be a fourth branch. And I call the fourth branch the covert, rogue government criminal enterprise. These people, this element of our society, is involved in the drugs, the illegal drugs, kidnapping children, and so on and so forth. And since I got out of the Bureau, I have done everything I can to expose it. I'm exposing it today. Now, one of the programs by the government, and I'm going to go into detail as to how the government operates, how this rogue element operates in the country. I'm sorry, excuse me. And one of the...
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Granada Forum. On November 11th, 2010, tonight we have an incredible guest, Ted Gunderson, a former bureau chief for the FBI in the early 80s. So without any further ado, let's give this gentleman a warm round of applause.
Thanks a lot. I feel like old home week. I've been here so many times. Can I raise this?
You don't get older.
Huh?
You don't get older.
I just had my 82nd birthday 2 days ago. All right. Let me raise this up a little bit here. was mechanically inclined. You got it? Let me get it up. That's good, right there. That's good, right there.
Hopefully it'll stay.
Beg your pardon?
You have a choir later, or these steps here?
I couldn't understand what he said. What'd you say, sir?
I'm expecting a choir.
Oh, choir? Oh, well, they're coming later. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for the invitation, Wendy. You're a special lady. She deserves a round of applause for what she's done. Boy. Well, you know, I heard a very inspiring speech at Chuck's 9/11 Truth Conference here, and I said, I've got to go see Wendy and get some information that I've developed that I've never presented before and get it out to the public. And that was a great conference, Chuck.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Before I begin, let me just mention that I'm going to do a series of 4 or 5 lectures. If I can't do it here, I'll do it with Dennis in the back room of his camp. I call it Iron City, because he's got a bunch of old cars out there. And but this is the first. And the reason I'm so inspired by your speakers that you had there, Chuck, is because there's a lot of information that needs to be given to the public. And I'm going to do the best I can. Now, there's those people who think there is no conspiracy. So there is a conspiracy, and my lectures are going to be entitled Conspiracy Reality. Okay, and I'm going to prove to you tonight that there is a conspiracy, and I hope you will pick this DVD up and pass it out to your friends. I had a young college fellow here from up north. Where are you? Was it Jason? Was that your name? Josh. Yeah. Josh. Yeah, and he said he's having trouble convincing his fellow students about what's going on. So when this is all over, you be sure to get a copy of this and make copies and pass that out on campus, okay? I have to go back to 1951. I graduated from the University of Nebraska in 1950. By the way, one of my colleagues there was Johnny Carson, and I knew Johnny Carson, yeah. And that's just plain disinformation by government operatives. So my first case, after I retired, as a private investigator, was the Dr. Jeffrey R. McDonald case. And those of you who've heard me before, I always start out my lectures with this case. I'm not going to go into detail because later on in one of my lectures I'm going to go into detail. But he was tried and convicted of murdering his wife and 2 children February 17, 1970, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences. I was contacted by some of his doctor friends, and they asked if I would investigate it. I said, yeah, I'll investigate it, if he did not commit the crime. If he committed the crime, I don't want anything to do with it. I talked to Dr. McDonald, and I was convinced that he was innocent. Within 10 months, I obtained a signed confession from a girl named Helena Stokely, and she said that he did not commit the murders. They were committed by her satanic cult group. And I appeared on a number of national TV shows in this regard, and went public with the information, and my life's never been the same since. People came from all walks of life, from all parts of the country, and told me about the satanic cult movement in this country. It is big, it is huge, it is dangerous, very dangerous. They sacrifice between 50 and 60,000 people every year. They're involved in kidnapping children and so forth, and it goes on and on and on. But that case is what really woke me up as to what was going on. I've always been a red, white, blue guy, mother, apple pie, Chevrolet, and that sort of thing. And beg your pardon, Dennis? Did you say something? No. Oh, okay. And this case said, in this instance, Dr. McDonald was framed, and the reason he was framed is because the government, mainly the military, were flying drugs in plastic bags in the body cavities of dead GIs out of Southeast Asia into the military bases here in the United States. And Lena told me that her satanic cult group distributed the drugs up and down the East Coast, and the higher-ups in the drug operation did not want this to be known, of course, that they were involved in the murder, and so they basically framed Dr. McDonald. I'm telling you right now, the man is absolutely innocent. He's been in jail for like 30 years, and we have an appeal before the Fourth Circuit at this time. I'm going to go into one of my lectures. I'm going to go into great detail about this case. I can probably talk about it for about probably an hour and a half to 2 hours. But very briefly, what we have in the appeal before the Fourth Circuit is my confessions that I took from Helena Stokely. By the way, she was murdered in January 1983, and also under one of the fingernail of one of the young ladies, one of the little girls, 2.5 and 5.5. Skin, not skin, but a hair with the root was recovered, and it did not belong to anybody in the McDonald family. Also, Colette, the wife, she had skin under her fingernail, and that skin was scraped from under the fingernails and given to William Ivory, the CID Army investigator, and it disappeared. So there have been a whole series of cover-ups on it. The case is a fascinating case. I really, really hope that we can get him out this time. But anyway, that's basically what happened. That gets me off the ground, so to speak, as to what really was going on. Now, I'm sure all of you are aware of the Illuminati. I'm probably preaching to the choir on this. And I'm sure you're aware that on May the 5th to meet with Bobby Kennedy. And then when Jack was murdered by the New World Order boys, I was taken over to White House Special Inquiry, and I worked White House Matters when Johnson was there. And on one occasion, later on when I was inspector, I'll come back to the White House and tell you what happened there. It's kind of interesting. And from there, I went up to New Haven, Connecticut. And I'd never been east of the Mississippi, so other than Alabama and Tennessee and so forth, and New York and Washington, D.C., but I really, in the New England area, it's a very beautiful state, very nice area, great assignment. And while I was there, the Black Panthers were extremely active. They were taking over college administration buildings. They were running around the country with gun belts on and weapons and so on and so forth. They're a really true revolutionary group. And I was in charge of anti-terrorism. And we did a job on the Black Panthers. And after the Panthers were down out and no longer active, I had a call from William C. Sullivan. And Bill told me I attribute the downfall of the Black Panther Party directly to you, your squad, and the New Haven Police Department. And from New Haven, I went on down to Philadelphia. I was number 2 man in Philadelphia. And in Philadelphia, I was assistant special agent in charge. And probably the most exciting case I'd ever worked in the FBI occurred July 12, 1972, Philadelphia International Airport. 2 terrorists had taken over an airplane, National Airlines Flight 496. And I negotiated with them for 2.5 hours under another airplane with the 3 jets engines running, and successfully for the release of 119 passengers. And I'm in the process now. I ran across my transcript of my negotiation with the terrorists. By the way, after we successfully rescued the 119 passengers, the plane, I let them take off in another plane, the original plane, and I had the second plane. One plane had run out of fuel and so on and so forth. So we let him go on, and they ran out of gas over Texas, and we negotiated down there for some 9 hours, and they finally gave up. One was sentenced to 60 years, the other one was sentenced to 40 years. But my transcript, I just ran across it recently. My negotiation, that's going to be on my website very soon, I think maybe within a month or so. But from Philadelphia, I went into FBI headquarters as a inspector, and then out later down to Memphis. I was in charge of the FBI Memphis division, and then in charge of the FBI Dallas division, and then the best assignment in the FBI, very frankly, I was in charge of the FBI Los Angeles division. Now, I had over 700 personnel under my command, a budget of $22.5 million. And we covered most of Southern California, 16 offices. And it was a great pleasure to be here. I did mostly public relations work. I had a staff of 24 supervisors, 3 other special agents in charge. I was a senior special agent in charge. And then on March the 30th of 1979, I retired. I had Pat Brown there, former governor. I had Jerry Brown there. I had Red Buttons. And I had the chief of police, the sheriff, I had the head of the highway patrol. It was who's who in the Los Angeles area. Now I mention that because if you go on the internet, you're going to see derogatory information about how I was kicked out of the FBI for practicing satanic ceremonies in the federal building, okay? And it was right after World War II. My brother had entered the Air Force, and he, over Germany, his bomber went down, he was killed, and he had graduated from the University of Iowa, by the way. So I'm Midwest born and bred, basically. But when I first got out of college, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, which I think happens very regularly. So I took a job with Hormel Meatpacking Company at selling hams. And my kids have always accused me of being a ham all along, so it worked out real well. They used to call me the FBI ham. And I'm driving down Grand River in Detroit, Michigan, and I heard about a friend of mine, Dick Kinsey, who had applied for the FBI and was accepted. And he was my college friend at the university. And I said, if Kinsey can make it, I can make it. And I just kept on driving downtown and applied for the job with the FBI. The only trouble was you had to be 25, and I was 22. So the fellow interviewed me, I'll never forget, his name is Zimmerman. He said, although you're only 22, why don't you write a letter to J. Edgar Hoover and tell him you look older? So I wrote a letter to J. Edgar Hoover, personal letter. I said, Dear Mr. Hoover, although I'm only 22, I look like I'm 28. Actually, I look like I was 19. Okay. As you can tell, I am young looking for my age. I always have been. But you know what? 6 weeks later, I was in Quantico, Virginia, shooting a gun, going to class, learning about collection and preservation of evidence, federal rules of procedure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I had to take a test first. I had to pass a physical. And that was the beginning of an absolutely fabulous career. The FBI in my day, back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, up to about 1980, was a great organization. I'm sorry to say that they have deteriorated considerably, and I'll go into that with details in a few minutes. But in my career, after I left training school, I went to Mobile, Alabama, and I'd never been south of the Mason-Dixon line, and I'm thinking, I'm going to the end of the world. But it was a great experience. And then from Mobile, Alabama, I was transferred to a small town, Union Springs, Alabama, a town of 2,500, just 50 miles west of Phoenix City. If you know anything about Phoenix City, Alabama, it was corrupt, prostitutes in and out, stolen cars. It was right next to Fort Benning, being Columbus, Ohio, or Columbus, Georgia. And so it was a real experience breaking in there. I worked general criminal. Fifth interstate shipment, interstate transportation, stolen motor vehicle. We had an extortion case and so on and so forth. And from Union Springs, I went up to Knoxville, Tennessee, worked atomic energy cases. From Knoxville, I went up to New York City and worked counter-espionage. We were very active exposing and identifying espionage agents for the Soviet bloc countries, the Russians and the Chinese, of course. And from there, I went to Albuquerque, New Mexico. I was there for about 5 years. And William C. Sullivan, who was number 2 man in the FBI, actually, there was Hoover and his associate, and then Bill was next, third person, came out to Los Alamos, New Mexico, for a lecture, and I drove him up to Los Alamos. And he took a shine to me. He said, Ted, you need to come back to headquarters. I went back to headquarters, worked organized crime and racketeering for 2.5 years when Bobby Kennedy and Jack Kennedy were in office. I had a case